Welcome to the 10-12, the podcast that covers all 10 teams in the Big 12 Conference, plus soon-to-be members BYU, Cincinnati, Houston, and UCF. Thank you for joining us this week. I'm your host, Phillip Slavin, as I am every episode of the show. Of course, the 10-12 podcast, the flagship show of the 10-12 network, the podcast network that loves to cover the Big 12 Conference. Find every show in the network at 1012network.com. Here we are on a Monday. And man, a lot happened last week. What a week it was. What a week I'm sure we will have. News just continues to pour in. Rumors continue to pour in. Rumors circulate. There's so much going on in college football, and the season is hurtling towards us. And what's interesting to me is that as interesting as this week is sure to be, it's not nearly as big as the week after. Right, that week after. The first week of August. It's the first week of August. It's our first month where we say college football starts this month. It's a big week, that first week of August, because that is when the exclusive negotiating window between the Pac-12 and ESPN and Fox, primarily ESPN, comes to a close on August 4th. It's going to be a huge week for us here at the 10-12 network, and I'm excited for you to find out why. We will obviously reveal more about that on August 1st. But we're going to talk about this week coming up and the week that happened, the week coming up. I emphasize that first week of August because I think this week's going to feel busy. There's going to feel like a lot of things because, again, a lot of news is going to come out. Some of it will be relevant a week later. Some of it won't. A lot of speculation will continue. That is what happens during conference consolidation season. It's ever-changing, ever-developing, and yet nothing's happened. For all the rumors and information and podcast guests that have come on to every show possible, nothing's actually happened. It's all just speculation. And I'm happy to ride the speculation train all the way to the station. It's a lot of fun. Just remember, this stuff takes time. And with the Pac-12 in an exclusive negotiating window with ESPN until August 4th, nothing is going to happen before then. Nothing. Nothing will. As far as last week goes, think about it. Think about the news that came down. The Big 12 and the Pac-12, no merger. It's not happening. It's off the table. That was according to Pete Thamel of ESPN, who initially reported that, and then everybody else followed. Right? Dennis Dodd reported that Notre Dame wants $75 billion from NBC, and the Big 12 or Big 10 could be a partner in helping make that come to fruition. You're going to see stuff about CBS come out. Here's what's most important. Until the Big 10's TV deals are done and announced, it doesn't matter what anybody says about the Big 12. It doesn't matter because the Big 10 is first. Everybody wants a slice of that pie. Everybody wants a slice of that Tier 1 pie. And if they can't get it, then the Big 12 is on the table. Pac-12 will be on the table potentially too. It's all just rumors. It's all positioning. It's all PR. Now, we are going to talk some conference consolidation here on the podcast. Our good friend, Matt Brown of Extra Points Newsletter, is going to join us. We're going to talk about what goes into the decision-making process as to whether or not to switch conferences. If you're not going to double or triple your TV revenue, if you're going to take a slight bump, a lot of other things suddenly matter that don't matter as much when we're talking $100 million versus 40. So he has some great insight. Plus, we're going to talk a little bit about NIL Collectives in light of the news of Texas Tech's Matador Club. And that is the reason we're talking about it. It's not a direct relation to any issues with the Matador Club, but specifically more NIL Collectives. Matt Brown is awesome. He's a fantastic guest, as always. Also today, we're doing another position group ranking. This time, we have the guests. Don't worry, it's not just me. We have two great guests, Joe Broback, Adam Lunt, joining us today. We're doing defensive back units. That is corners and safeties. It is fantastic. About that Texas Tech NIL Collective, the Matador Club. Look, at this point, I think you all know what was down with the emojis, the cactus emojis that overloaded Twitter last week. If you're not, I'll sum it up real quick for you if you didn't know. Started with the Matador Club announcement. Of course, Texas Tech has signed 100 football players. That includes 15 walk-ons to $25,000 a year contracts. freaking awesome. TCU's recruiting director, Brian Carrington, decided to start kind of subtweeting Texas Tech. Y'all really got to stop romanticizing what appears to be unique NIL deals, he said on Twitter. While they waive what appears to be a big number, I urge you to ask these schools to quantify your brand potential as an individual entity separate from the university in the same market. He went on to include who would want to build their brand in the desert and use the cactus emoji. Texas Tech fans, doing what they do, grabbed that cactus emoji and ran with it. And not just Texas Tech as fans, the university, football coaches, social media. The cactus has now become almost the secondary logo, mascot, if you will. And man, if they have a cactus mascot at Texas Tech football games, all I know is this. This offseason, Texas Tech confirmed tortilla throwing, so that's a thing. They embraced the cactus emoji. That's a thing. TCU Texas Tech, November 9th. That's all I'm going to say is that. I cannot wait for it. I cannot wait for it. As I mentioned, Matt Brown is going to join us in a bit. There is one thing that he and I talked about before we recorded that I wanted to talk about with you. And it's more just an airing of a thought that I've been working through for a little while, a few weeks. Big 12 fans are salty on social media, especially at national media, who work for The Athletic. I think that's the media group that they are most angry with, and especially some podcasters who are there, and also one ESPN reporter in particular who tried to help the AAC seemingly raid the Big 12. It's not that national sports media is lamenting what is potentially about to happen to Oregon State, Washington State, and other Pac-12 schools. That's not why Big 12 fans are mad. It seems that way. It seems like we're angry about that. Look, I hate this for them. Oregon State and Washington State, I don't have any reason to dislike those fan bases. As an Oklahoma State fan, I feel a kindred spirit to Oregon State. Orange and black, second-tier program in your state, led by a former star quarterback who's made your offense a lot of fun and starting to build something special at your university. Sounds awful familiar. I have nothing wrong with Washington State. I don't blame them for the issues with the last head coach. I hate this for any program or any fan base that has to get through it. Just like I hated it for the Big 12 teams last year. What Big 12 fans are mad about is not that national media is sad for the Pac-12. It's that last year, instead of vocalizing how much it sucked for Kansas State, Oklahoma State, Iowa State, and Texas Tech, national media was too interested in coming up with clever names like Hateful Eight or Vengeful Eight or Forgotten Eight. Haha. Look how clever we are. I'm not mad that national media is sad for Pac-12 schools. I'm pissed. I'm pissed that casual, flippant comments were the best they could come up with the Big 12 teams that remained last year. And I don't care about the history of the Big 12 or the history of the Pac-12. I don't give a rat's ass. I care about the teams who are left to pick up the pieces. I care about the fan bases that have to deal with this and live with this. But the conversation is about the conference. I don't care about the conference. The Big 12 teams weren't mad about how you talked about the conference. They're mad about how you talked about the teams and the fan bases. Tone is everything. It's not always what you say, but how you say it. National media members can say they were sad, but it was never expressed in the same way that it is now. Now, whether that's more to do with the sinking in of the reality of where college athletics is going, from an idea that bloggers and podcasters like to talk about all the time a decade ago, to the harsh reality of so many schools being left in the cold of whatever this future of college football is going to be, or they're just enjoying the download numbers and clicks too much to have actual sympathy. I don't know, but you cannot be shocked or upset that Big 12 fans are salty right now and happy to come after you. And I know that many national media, who do not listen to this show, but I don't care, misinterpret this. I really think they do. They misinterpret why Big 12 fans are angry. And I think in some cases, some Big 12 fans don't actually know what it is that they're angry about. It's simple. We just want the same respect you're showing the schools that are going through this now to have been shown to us last year. Leave the conference history crap aside. I don't care about any of that. Well, this conference was put together. Shut up. I don't care who was formed in the 30s. I don't care about the conference. I care about the teams. I care about the teams. The players, the fan bases, Hell, the employees at universities are going to have to go through some major harsh realities when that day comes. That's what I care about. I care about the teams. And I think deep down, all of you do too. So I'll ask you to do the thing I asked many on Twitter who laughed at me about it. Some agreed. You can feel you are owed Big 12 fans some opportunity to laugh and scoff and tell all these big Pac-12 schools why they should join us because they're all doomed. You can enjoy this mountaintop you're sitting on, feeling great at the moment because you feel in a position of power, but remember how you felt when you were not. And I get it. It's hard when you feel like you're in the driver's seat atop the mountaintop for the first time in years to want to take that opportunity and take everything you can from it. We're talking about college sports and college fans. I don't expect you to be reasonable. Fans is short for fanatics. But I will ask you to do this. Remember where you were. Remember how you felt. Remember what you did not like. And pay that same respect to those fan base. They trashed. I don't care. Because if you think this is the end of it and the last time you're going to be sitting in a bad spot, and that it's not all going to keep coming around again over and over and over again, do yourself a favor. Act with kindness, compassion, and empathy, because every fallen kingdom was atop the world at some point. They're all gone now. It's not a terrible way to live. Kindness, empathy, caring about how others are feeling, what they're going through, especially when it's something you've been through. The idea that because you had some hardship in life that other people should have to experience that as well is one I will never grasp or understand. I wouldn't want anybody in the world to have to go through anything that in my life I would view as the worst of times. I don't wish that on anyone. Neither should you. Because that ain't it, folks. That ain't it. All right. We're getting a little bit too far outside of sports here, so let's rein this back in. Matt Brown, as I mentioned, coming up. Position group rankings, defensive backs coming up. Excited for both of those. Next week's a big week. A big week here for the 10-12 network. Next week, starting August 1st, you're not going to want to miss the August 1st show. You are not going to want to miss next week's episode. I'm glad you're here for this one because it's a doozy. It's long, but it's good. It's real good. Before we get to that, a little podcasting business, Home Field Apparel, the most comfortable vintage college sports apparel you will ever wear. Every Big 12 school's on there now, folks. Every single Big 12 school is now available on Home Field Apparel. All of them. All 14. 14. Every school that's going to be in this conference in 2023, the 2023 season, they're there. And you can get 15% off your first order on every single amazing shirt with the promo code NETWORK12, NETWORK12. So if you're a TCU fan, Texas Tech fan, OU fan, Oklahoma State, Houston, Cincinnati, BYU, Texas, Iowa State, Baylor, Texas Tech, UCF, West Virginia, and if I forgot one, I'm sorry. Promo code NETWORK12, 15% off your first order. Be rocking the most comfortable vintage college sports apparel you will ever own, you will ever want, you will ever need this college football season. All right, 3 great guests, 2 fantastic interviews. I've held you up long enough. Let's get to it. So obviously, conference consolidation, as we refer to it here, is ever-changing, ever-moving, and rumors are left, right, and sideways. But I wanted to have a conversation today that felt a little more concrete. No matter what decisions are made by what schools, I think it's important to talk about what things go into those decisions before they are made, because obviously TV money is the talking point and football is the sport we're all focused on, but there are other things schools have to consider when deciding to switch conferences. So I'm very excited to bring somebody on who is very well versed in conference realignment and consolidation. Now, a lot of it is at the FCS and D2 level, but I do think even though those are vastly different than FBS, even to P5 and G5, there is a lot that translates across all of sports here. So very excited to have the publisher and owner of Extra Points, a subscription that I personally have and pay for myself, Matt Brown. Matt, welcome back to the show, man.
Hey, thanks so much for having me. It's great to be here.
Absolutely. obviously the conversation we're seeing a lot from the Big 12 side, Big 12 fan sides who are talking about this is, okay, the Pac-12 is in this tough situation. Obviously they're negotiating with ESPN. That window remains open until August 4th. We don't know what that offer from ESPN is going to be, if they're going to sign a deal or if they're going to go out to market. And the conversation's about money. USC and UCLA are leaving for the Big Ten, where they're going to make vast sums of money compared to what they were. Same thing for Oklahoma and Texas going to the SEC in that decision last year. And there's a big difference between more than doubling your revenue from TV and seeing a 25 to 30% bump, right? Which I think is a big thing. People are kind of, I look, when it comes to millions of dollars, people have a hard time with how much that actually is in relation to sports, and have a hard time with how much things actually cost. So I don't want to talk about that so much today. It is obviously a factor. What I'm more interested in is, what are the other things that play into whether or not a school decides to switch conferences? Because these are not decisions made by athletic directors or football coaches or fans or boosters. They may be able to have a voice at the table, but university presidents, school boards, school chancellors, those are the ones who are making the decisions as to whether or not a school changes a conference affiliation. So we can break these down one by one if you want, but just if you were to talk about some of the other things that schools consider and weigh on the decision as to whether or not they want to switch which conference they're affiliated with.
Sure. No, it's a great point. And we just can't emphasize that last part of what you said enough, that coaches, and even to some extent, even athletic directors, are not the people that are driving these decisions. They're not the ones that ultimately have the final say. Your AD is generally very involved. It is unusual for a school to make a decision that their sitting AD really opposes for realignment, but it's really about presidents. So a major factor, and this is different from school to school and conference to conference, but typically a very significant factor is institutional fit. And that can mean different things to different schools, but very broadly, universities want to athletically affiliate with schools that have lots in common with them. And sometimes that means by school type, whether that's public school versus private school, whether that's similar budgets, similar levels of academic selectivity, whether you're looking at secular institutions versus ecclesiastical institutions versus other kinds of private schools. I remember talking to, I've used this example on the air a lot, but I was talking with a staffer at the Patriot League, a year and a half ago, and I made some kind of offhanded remark like, "Oh, it must be really easy, as you're figuring things out, because your league is so similar. Everyone's within a bus ride of each other. They're all very selective institutions. Nobody's trying to join the SEC. That there's a lot of truth to that. But then when we sit down for president's meeting, we're going to have somebody like a general, from a service academy. We might have a Jesuit priest. We might have a secular university administrator for a long time. And they're all coming in with very different perspectives. So if a school has an opportunity to affiliate with similar institutions, often, and if they're not going to really financially competitively damage themselves, that's often what they want to do. At the P5 level, historically, that idea of institutional fit has carried a lot of currency with administrators in the Big Ten and the Pac-12. And I understand why some fans think this is irrelevant, or it's elitist, or it doesn't make sense. And I would say there's not all of those criticisms are wrong. But and I'm not saying I agree with them. I'm just saying, as a reporter, I know that people at Stanford and Cal and Washington care about being able to say, these are our peers. We are like these schools. We are, secular. We are research oriented. Most of us are very selective. We have this R1 designation, right? And so you're trying to affiliate with schools like that. Other leagues, like the American Athletic, and to some extent, the modern Big 12, don't share that. And sometimes it's because, hey, what we think is more important is how we fit together athletically, or we don't have the luxury to have institutional fit. It's different for every league. I can tell you that the West Coast Conference, for example, mid-major basketball league, cares about this a great deal and would turn down schools that would help them athletically because they don't fit this institutional profile. The Western Athletic Conference doesn't care about this as much. And part of that is because they can't afford to, and part of that is because their philosophy is different. But when you're evaluating that, fit institutionally is a major factor. The other, I think, important thing for people to realize is that Money is a huge factor, but money is more than just broadcast television. Joining conferences also increases or changes costs. Does going into this league change the way that our conference distribution is set up? Do we need to increase our spending because the median athletic budget among our new peers is different? Do we need to change what sports we sponsor, either by dropping sports or adding sports or pursuing affiliate memberships, which might increase costs for other sports? What will our travel costs look like? Will we need to pay travel subsidies to get people to come here? Will it impact our ability to raise money? Are we going to be in places not just where we are recruiting athletes, but where we are recruiting students, where we have alumni, where we can have development events? Like I was literally just talking to an AD at the Division II level who was considering a conference change, in part because they can't set up any kind of alumni engagement or alumni development events because where their graduates live are not where they're competing athletically. They're like, there's no TV money in Division II, but this is a chance to hit up people for donations, which go outside the athletic department. And that's mission critical for us. So it will vary a little bit here from league to league, from school to school, but those are some of the factors that everybody has to consider, at least on some level.
And that all makes sense. I think of it when you consider a job, and everyone has different priorities when they look for jobs. Some cases you just have to go where you're going to make money to make ends meet, right? But I always think of, and we've made this comp, like one of the reasons I'm at the job I'm at is, could I go somewhere else and make more money? I could, but I love the fit where I'm at. I enjoy the people that I work with. It makes my day-to-day job better. And making more money might mean more travel, more time in the car, less time with the family. There's a lot of things when making these decisions that go into it beyond just the dollars. Now, a lot of those things can be negated when we're talking about going from $40 million a year to more than $100 million a year, but they play more of a factor when we're talking about significantly smaller increases, right? As opposed to more than doubling your annual salary, you're only getting a 15% or 20% bump, which could be the thing that makes you make that decision. But if we're talking, it's the comp of uprooting your family and moving to a new city where you may not know everybody, where you don't have those pre-built and pre-established relationships. And a lot of things are very different. So when you have to make those moves, or when you're desperate to make those moves, like Cincinnati, Houston, UCF, looking for that opportunity, it's easier for them to do so than for a Power 5 peer, a team in another conference that's viewed similar to yours, to transition from one to the other. So all these things play into it. You talked about alumni, you talked about students. I think that's a thing that doesn't get talked about enough, is recruiting. And not just recruiting athletes, but recruiting students. I think those were a lot of the things that played into Colorado moving to the Pac-12 when they did a little over a decade ago. So let's look at the four corner schools as they're being referred to as the two Arizonas, Arizona State, Colorado, Utah. Those are the schools that seem to be linked to the Big 12, potentially joining the most. Looking at those four schools, outside of the Pac-12 falling apart and they just need to find a landing spot, why might they view the Big 12 as a place they want to be, or why would they view the Big 12? We know that the academic side is a big thing. We don't have the AAU. They're not all research facilities, but from a school perspective, why might some of those schools look at the Big 12 and say, this is a potential place for us, and here are the benefits to that?
This is a great question. And I honestly suspect that this has become conventional wisdom in a way that the data doesn't really support. The single biggest reason, which you had alluded to, is because those four schools no longer believe in the long-term stability or trajectory or alignment within the rest of the Pac-10, Pac-12, whatever it is that we're calling it, right? If we have to backfill to the Mountain West, that undermines the core value proposition of the Pac-12, which is part of why we signed up in the first place, because we think Oregon or Washington are not going to stay for very long, which will impact our ability to raise money or do things for X, Y, or Z. I don't know, capital, K, know here that the Big 12 will be able to offer substantially more money, either broadcast wise, MMR wise, period, than what the Pac-10 can offer if they still have Oregon and Washington. I've seen the same Navigate numbers everybody else on the internet has seen. And I'll tell you guys, I talked to the people that did that study back in March, and I've talked to other people in the TV industry. They're like, I got a lot of questions about this. Like the trajectory is correct. The exact numbers, probably overinflated for some of these institutions. In terms of like athlete or student recruitment, you're right. This is a little bit of a challenge. Like I'm literally looking this up on LinkedIn right now. Like the place where Colorado alumni live the most outside of Colorado is California. They, you have some in some of these major Midwestern cities. It's pretty common for large state universities to have people in Chicago and New York and these other places. But ideologically and academically, like that school hits the West Coast a little bit more. I'm going to literally do this. This is very compelling, like live read. I'm just going to double check right now with Arizona. I want to say it's relatively similar. We can double check, but yeah, same thing up here. Like outside of the state of Arizona, number one place where Arizona alumni live are in California. And specifically in like the greater, I mean, part of that is specifically in the greater Los Angeles area, but throughout the entire state. If, for example, one of these schools believed institutionally, it's way more important for us to have a bigger presence in Texas or in Kansas City or nationally, the Big 12 might make some more sense. I don't think that's what the data shows right now. And I say think, not like absolutely not, or, all these Texas Tech fans are full of baloney or something, or this is all fake news. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying, as a reporter on this beat, I don't think I have enough information, reported or otherwise, to say this is definitely the case.
Yeah, and that was really a big part of what led me to this, is I had seen some mention of Arizona State potentially seeing the value in trying to recruit the state of Texas more, right? Part of it being proximity. There's tons and tons and tons of people living in the state of Texas, and building an alumni base there would be valuable. But I hadn't seen any, I seen speculation, but I hadn't seen anybody report it. I hadn't seen any data to back it up. And it sounds nice when you hear it, and it sounds like, yeah, why wouldn't people want to get more students from the state of Texas? But just because something sounds nice doesn't mean it's the reality. So again, we're talking about schools leaving essentially relationships they've been in for a long period of time, having less annual athletic access to where their alumni base is associated. This plays into why, despite what people may say, it's not as easy as just like, yeah, let's just go. Let's head off to the Big 12. This is going to be better for us in the long run.
Yeah, and it all comes with opportunity costs, and it has to be a university-wide commitment. Anybody joining the Big 12 tomorrow will not in and of itself direct significant students from DFW or Houston to enroll in that school. If it is joined by a campus-wide marketing and publicity and recruitment effort, and they start sending a bunch of reps to the high schools in those places, and they buy billboards, and it's a unified thing, then it could. That isn't always the case. And that's a question that's much bigger than just the athletic department.
Yeah, agreed. Matt, I've run out of questions here, and you've provided excellent answers. But there is one other thing I want to talk to you about since you're here. Obviously, Texas Tech fans have been all over Twitter. For those who've seen the cactus emoji, we've talked about that a little bit. But you did get into a discussion with some Twitter fans, or some Texas Tech fans on Twitter, about the Matador Club, their new NIL collective that's basically giving 100 football players $25,000 a year, or 2,500, 25,000. Point is,
I think it's 25,000.
It's 25,000, which I believe is the largest promise to cross the football that I've seen from anybody do. I know Miami's had something similar, but got into an interesting debate with Texas Tech fans about it. And I think Texas Tech fans got a little like, why are people coming after us for ours if you didn't go after other schools for theirs? And I think the reality is, you just didn't notice people go after Miami and other schools for theirs because you're not paying attention to what people are saying about it more so than you are yours. But can you kind of talk about these collectives? I know they're legal, but man, and I'm not going to tell any school, as long as they're allowed, if that's what you want to go do, that's fine. And this is not in any way, shape, form an anti-pay the kids argument whatsoever. I'm all for the kids being able to get what they can while they can. Props to you. But can you kind of speak to some of the issues you were raising about collectives as a whole?
Sure. So what I can say here is like my personal, what's the right word I'm looking for here? My frustration, my concern about this is not that a collective is paying an athlete. That I don't think that's an ethical problem. The concern there is whether the athlete actually gets the money. Like the idea that Tech or Texas or anybody is guaranteeing X amount of money for a recruit. Like, I'm not here to complain about that. I'm not an amateurism believer. My concern here is that these groups, and Texas Tech is not the first or the only to do this, are claiming that they are 501c3s. And then that the money that they are raising from other boosters to give to those athletes is charitable, and therefore that people can write it off on their taxes. That's tax fraud. And that's not just me saying this. This is what I have been told from numerous professors that study nonprofit law. I have heard this from many CPAs. I have heard this from attorneys that are involved in this space, saying, like, not only is this not likely to stand up to IRS scrutiny, it's also not really a good idea operationally, because 501c3s have much stricter reporting requirements, which will also require them to publicize lots of the individual deals that they're doing with athletes, which an LLC does not have to do. And most small donors giving to one of these groups are taking the standard deduction. They're not really benefiting from the tax anyway. This is when I am criticizing this. I'm not using this to dunk on Texas Tech. Any Big 12 fan that is confused about that should know I grew up in Columbus. I went to Ohio State. I spent an entire newsletter literally just ripping Ohio State's collective for doing this, because I think it's really unethical. The challenge here, though, is the only entity that can really do anything about it is the IRS. Many of these groups that are saying that they're 501c3s right now actually are not. States cannot grant that status. They can grant nonprofit status. 501c3 just comes from the federal government. There's an enormous backlog. To the best of my knowledge, only a tiny handful of collectives have actually gotten that. And it's no guarantee that they'll be able to recertify at that status. But just like with the NCAA, it might take 2 or 3 years or longer for anybody in Washington to bother asking for receipts or following up. And I think a lot of these collective donors and managers have decided, I like those odds, because even if you ding me, I'm probably not going to go to jail. I'll just lose my nonprofit status. And if I can do this now to go get the recruit that I need and we can win for 3 years, I'll take my chances. That's not what I would do, but it's not my money, and it's not my relationship here. So that is my concern, and that is something that not just Texas Tech is doing. That's at Ohio State. That's at Notre Dame. That's at Iowa. That's at several other institutions. I don't think it is ethical anywhere.
Okay, so outside of the ethical issue, is there concern for student athletes who are participating this down long term?
No, I mean, in the event that, say, somebody at the IRS looks at the receipts and looks at the case law and says, by God, Matt Brown is right. The law is very clear about this. This is not actually a charity. Paying somebody 7 times their market worth to be able to speak at an event is not charitable. I am revoking the 501c3 designation. That is a problem for the collective manager. That might be a problem for any of the big donors who are trying to lower their taxable income. That wouldn't be an issue for the athletes. They would not be exposed to like criminal liability or anything. Their risk would only be insofar as the NCAA or maybe the state of Texas decides to enforce any of their state laws, which is pretty unlikely. But no one's going to be hauled off to recruit jail because their collective lied about being a charity. Now, there's some other individual exposure that some of these athletes could get in big trouble for. The most obvious one is their own tax liability. If you're being paid by a charity, whether that's a real charity or a charity, that income is still very taxable, and you need to be reporting that, and you need to be setting aside money for it. Even if you're getting non-cash assets, I am convinced we are going to hear some stories in the next couple of months once the IRS cleans up that backlog of athletes that took that $55,000 truck and did not realize that meant that was a taxable asset and they had to set aside some cash for it, and they're going to be in big trouble. That can get you in hot water, not so much the 501c3 stuff.
No. Everyone was in such a hurry to get all the NIL stuff set up and ready to go that I am worried about the student athletes. I'm happy this is going their way. I hope that they're being taken care of by some adults or agents who are doing this the right way. There will be some who aren't, and I'm very worried for them. I feel like the people who actually should be getting in trouble are going to be just fine, and the kids are somehow still going to end up holding the short end of the stick at the end of all this. That seems to be how it goes more often than not. Matt, man, you are awesome. I appreciate it. As I mentioned, I am a paid subscriber to Extra Points newsletter. That is not why you came on. You were just gracious enough to give us some of your time today. But please plug the newsletter, man. It is fantastic.
It's my pleasure, folks. If you're interested in off the field coverage of what shapes college athletics, the original reporting, unique analysis, whether that's the EA Sports college football video game, whether that's NIL, conference realignment, changing NCAA policy, travel logistics, any of that stuff. You can find it at extrapointsmb.com.
Also, host of the Going for Two podcast. And as far as the newsletter goes, folks, if you're curious what kind of sound effects and music your school might be sending off to EA for the college football video game revival, Matt is getting an updated list constantly of that. I know UCF is one of the schools he's gotten information from. It's kind of neat. It's a weird thing to care about, but I find it very, very interesting. So I would subscribe. There is a non-paid version if you guys want to do so, but I would get that in your email inbox on the regular. It's absolutely worth it, even if you don't read every one, which I'll admit I don't, but I read most of them. Matt, again, thank you so much for your time today. I really do appreciate it, sir.
Hey, it's my pleasure. Take care, y'all.
Are you a parent listening to this podcast with a child at home, either in middle school or high school, but already thinking about college planning, scholarships, or dreaming of them playing sports in college? Do you know a high school or middle school athlete who wants to go and play in college? Whether it's D1, D2, D3, or just they're not even sure, they just want to keep playing during college. Well, let us introduce you to one of our friends of the podcast and a company who is an expert in the world of college recruiting, Recruit Route. Led by our friend Brian Bedford, a 25-year veteran of recruiting and former D1 recruiting director, Recruit Route offers a full suite of offerings to help student athletes, parents, and high school coaches be better educated and empowered to successfully navigate the college recruiting process. Check out our friends at recruit-route.com. That's recruit-route.com. Don't forget, run your route in recruiting with Recruit Route.
Current and former athletes, members of the athletic department, and of course the best fans in the country all make up a very special group we like to call the Cyclone family. Join me, Jamie Steyer Johnson, as I bring you closer to the people that make Iowa State unique each week on the Cyclone Family podcast. Some names you may know, while others may be new to you, but one thing's for sure, this is one family reunion you won't want to miss. Each week on the Cyclone Family podcast.
All right. Hopefully this time, by the end of this, I have both of our two guests' audio so that you can actually hear why they are ranking the teams where they are in our position group rankings. We don't have a repeat of last week where it's just me telling you what they said kind of verbatim, kind of as best I can, and then my audio. So hopefully this is done correctly, or I'm just going to shut this thing down for a few weeks and take a nap. Joining us today for our defensive back rankings, that's what we are doing. That is a combination of corners and safeties. And if you want to throw in linebackers, you're welcome to in pass coverage, but we'll mostly focus on CBs and safeties. Two return guests. Thrilled to have them both. One, the author of one of my favorite college football preview magazines. It is one of the things that I use when I set up my rankings episodes. That is, of course, Joe Broback. Joe, welcome back to the show, man.
I'm glad to be back. I'm excited to talk about a list that we've talked about is probably ever changing, might change as we go along here.
I can't promise that the list I have right now is the list that I will end up with at the end of this recording. Of course, we write them all down, and I'll average them out as I always do and post that on social. Also joining us, man, it's so nice to have him back on the show. It's nice to hear his voice ever since his podcast went off the air. Mr. Tape Doesn't Lie himself, Adam Lunt. Adam, welcome back, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Good to get back on a podcast and dust off the old microphone, talk some college football. Like I mentioned earlier, it's the slums of July. So I'll talk crazy defensive back rankings with just about anyone, especially you two guys. So thanks for having me on.
Yeah, absolutely, Adam. When we do these, I always have like a list of guests I want to get. And so typically, if you've listened to this for a couple of years now, there's some repeat guests, but there's a reason that they're repeat guests. It's because they know what they're talking about and they do a good job. And I trust their planning and research far more than I trust my own. So I let them do most of the heavy lifting because, especially this year with a 2-month-old, I'm just going to keep using my children as an excuse for my inadequacies for until they're 18 and out of the house. So really it's like a reset with the third one. I've got 18 years now. Okay. So we are doing defensive backfields. That's how we were ranking them. That is a combination of corners and safeties. We just start at number one, as we always do, which usually when number one's not too exciting, it's a consensus. I get the feeling it won't be today. Joe, since you are the man who writes and publishes a college football preview magazine, I'm going to let you come out the gate at number one here. Who do you have at the top of your list, sir?
Oh man, what an honor. Well, I'm just going to start with Oklahoma. I will say that I'm glad that Bookie is gone because I was so sick of all the the unforgivable, ridiculous penalties for no reason and the talking trash and not backing it up. So I'm just happy that there's some consistency on that backside. I just really like the combination of the talent they have returning and Brent Venables. I think that's just a great combination. The corners really intrigue me. Key Lawrence, Woody Washington are just two to start. I really like what they can do in terms of their talent. And like I said, Venables coming in just is something that obviously we don't know exactly what we're going to get, but we've seen what he's done at Clemson, and you pair that with the talent at Oklahoma. And that's really exciting. Now, Billy Bowman looks like he is becoming a bodybuilder from what I've seen on social media. He's just absolutely jacked. Now, whether or not that translates to the field, I don't really know, but I just think they have so much talent, so much depth, and they have a coach that knows how to coach a defense and how to create an elite defense. I didn't really see anybody that could compete with that.
I'm going to go with Kansas State. I think at the end of the day, this is an incredibly hard list to compile. Lots of incomplete units. And I think, I'll be honest. So Julius Brents is the guy that intrigues the hell out of me because one, 6'4" cornerback is like what everyone dreams of. But I think, and I'm gonna say his name and I'm gonna totally butcher it, but it's gonna be fun anyways. Ikao Boye-Do, I think is how you. I don't know. I probably butchered it. Nonetheless, I remember him specifically like locking down one side of the field. He was the guy. He reminds me of like from Oklahoma State, like Rodarius Williams 2 years ago, where like he didn't put it up any stats because no one threw to his side of the field. And I think when you have two solid cornerbacks, you can have average safeties and still be a really, really good secondary. So I think I'm more inclined to go towards the really, really top end subgroup of the bigger group as the top unit. And I feel interesting person to keep an eye on is Sean Robinson. Some Big 12 fans may remember him from the former TCU quarterback that transferred in. Apparently he moved to safety and played at Missouri last year. I thought he was still cornerback. So I learned something. I don't know if he's any good, but just I'm interested to watch him play safety. So I'll roll with K-State as my number one unit.
Yeah, he was playing safety at Missouri for a couple of years, as far as I recall.
I guess I'm lacking on SEC East depth charts. So I'm guilty as charged there. So.
You don't follow every former TCU player who transfers? Adam, come on. Man.
That would be a full-time job. There's a lot of quarterbacks that transferred from TCU. So no, I do not, unfortunately, for the listeners.
Okay. All right. Joe, you and I are in agreement here. I have Oklahoma at number one as well. You made really good points on Woody Washington and Key Lawrence. Justin Broyles, who I thought was pretty solid last year, getting bumped back. I think he probably ends up behind Bowman. If you're telling me the guy who started last year and played fairly well is now a backup, that tells me that your depth is really good. I also really like the addition of transfer corner CJ Colden from Wyoming. I really like OU's depth. I really like that they have two guys that I like in Woody Washington and Key Lawrence. Another transfer I forgot to mention, Trey Morrison, who came over from North Carolina. Obviously, Venables played again, as a team at Clemson, coached against him, has seen him quite a few times, very familiar with him, and brought him over for a reason. I believe he's supposed to be play at nickel. He's rated pretty well, rated well in coverage. Not as good at run blocking. Luckily at nickel, he can just sit out there and stay in coverage. I like this unit as a whole, and they have two really strong pieces. I think most of my early ones are based off of you've got a couple of strong pieces or a really strong piece and then a nice bit of depth. And I think that's what Oklahoma brings to the table this year. Okay, so at number 2, Joe, who do you have, sir?
So this is where TCU comes in for me. And I think it's just I have a little bit too much love for Travius Hodges-Tomlinson. I just really like his game. He's one of, Adam mentioned before, when you have good corners, then you're usually pretty good, even if you have average safety play. We kind of talked about this before the show, but Noah Daniels is a guy I think a lot of people were in love with going into the 2021 season, but obviously just can't stay on the field. So if he stays on the field and he is what everybody thinks he is, then, I really like what they have kind of on the back end. But yeah, this is one of those, I really like them, and that might have, influenced my rankings, but I just think they have so much talent. And then when they're firing on all cylinders, they're a really good group.
I have Texas. Texas is back, apparently. I want to jump off a bridge now for saying that. I think so. I guess all of my apparently I like tall defensive backs. I'm influenced. I'm easily swayed by that, but certainly interested in Ryan Watts, transfer from Ohio State, 6'3", 6'3.5". Again, super tall for a bound. Like, I think when you can get super tall cornerbacks that you can lay out in the boundary, because all Big 12 teams like to play with those hashes and play the wide side of the field, and then when you've got a rangy cornerback that you can sit out there and just set it and forget it, I think that's a pretty huge advantage. And then you've got a guy on the other side who's Deshawn Jameson, who we're a little bit more familiar with. It's more of a traditional twitchy defensive back that has a lot of experience. This again, I mean, very similar to Kansas State. Their safety room is insane. They have like 5 safeties. They've all moved positions. They all used to be linebackers or nickelbacks or cornerbacks. They're all playing a different position now. So I don't know exactly how that's going to play out, but I think if you look at the upside on some of the players they do have Anthony Cook coming back as a returning safety, returning starter at safety that I certainly like. But just the upside, I think, of those two corners with a little bit of experience and versatility at safety, I think is good enough for them to be at number 2, which again, I'll reiterate that, there's like a razor thin amount of separation between maybe even the top 6 or 7. So anyways, I'll roll with the horns, number 2.
Okay. Joe, we got to quit doing this. I have TCU at number 2 as well. Like, I agree on the issue of Noah Daniels. I don't know. Did you say that before we recorded? I don't remember. No, I'm tired.
I think Adam mentioned it before.
Okay. So obviously Travis Tomlinson has a
You guys are going to love where I have TCU, by the way. It's going to be a lot of fun.
This is going to be a fun episode. I can already tell. Look, I think he's one of the best corners in the Big 12. I think he's going to play really well. Obviously, Noah Daniels is talented. There's no question there, but there is issues of injury. Then bringing in Josh Newton from Louisiana Monroe, which is a guy that a lot of people wanted. Now I feel like you have 3 guys. So even if you have issues with Daniels, I like Newton a lot. I think you're going to be able to have Daniels should be at least play a couple games and give Newton some time to acclimate. You bring in Colorado transfer Mark Perry for safety. I think that helps a unit that needed a little bit of help. You get experience at safety as well with Nick Bradford and Josh Foster. Like I like TCU. I like here's the thing with Gary. Like, they had obvious issues, but the talent was far from bare when he left. Like, TCU continued to recruit really, really well. They recruited really well on the defensive side of the ball. And I think they recruited really well in the defensive backfield. So, like, I think that new defensive coordinator who came from Tulsa, whose name completely escapes me right now, I think he's got plenty to work with. I really like this unit. I have them at number 2. Okay. Joe, number 3. Who do you got?
So I could have joined Adam. I kind of went back and forth on who I wanted at 2, at 3. And I have Texas 3rd, kind of for everything what Adam said. Just, Deshawn Jameson is that familiar face, that steady presence that we've seen. I'm also excited to see what Ryan Watts can do. And then there's I think that Texas has been recruiting so well, and we're just waiting for it to translate to the field. And if they're able to actually find a way to do that, then this group is going to be exciting. Obviously, we believe that the offense is going to score a ton of points, but I think one thing that you'll benefit from that is because their receivers are so talented, your DBs are going to get some work in practice. And so you're going to see, your practices almost will be more difficult than some of the games that you're going to play. And I think that your DBs will, it's either sink or swim with the talent that Texas has. I think that it's going to be a team that swims. And I'm excited to see how they kind of bounce back and really rise up in the Big 12 this year.
I got Oklahoma State, and that may be a surprise, but I do think it's kind of an interesting unit because you lose, your top 2 corners. I mean, you basically lose your nickelback, your top two or three safeties. So there's a lot out the door. But at the same time, I probably don't think it's a huge reach to say that Jason Taylor's a top 2 or 3 safety in the league, if not better. And then if you go down the list, I mean, go back to the bowl game in 2020. Brevin Jordan, NFL tight end. Who was the guy that was making plays at the end of the game in the bowl game? It was Thomas Harper. So these guys have a lot of reps. Who is the cornerback that made some of the key defensive deflections against Notre Dame in the bowl game? It was Corey Black. It was Jabbar. Go back to the Bedlam game on 3rd down where, God, they almost scored in the left corner of the end zone. Who was the cornerback that made the play? It was Corey Black. So they're not returning starters. There's a lot of snaps underneath these players. And then really what I want to focus on the most is Kendall Daniels, who I think is probably the most exciting player that Oklahoma State has had in 15 years or something like that. Legitimate 6'4", 210 NFL, like first round caliber safety who I think, should thrive with Derek Mason coming in, who's a defensive back specialist. I just think that there's a ton of experience there. They'll be fine at cornerback. And I think that they basically have a box safety in Jason Taylor, a rangy free safety in Kendall Daniels, who can play in that cover 1 scheme. And you have your twitchy nickelback, Thomas Harper, who's like your Swiss Army knife. There's not much depth, so if anyone gets hurt, this is probably go downhill. But I do think this is going to be a pretty good unit, despite the fact that they lost quite a few players to transfer in the NFL draft. So
yeah, no, I like that pick there. I have some thoughts on them. We'll get to them in a minute. Okay, so for number 3, I have Kansas State. I think Prince and Boydo are the best cornerback tandem in the Big 12 and will be this year. And both kind of came out of nowhere last year. I would expect both to take a step forward this year and continue to improve. Throw in graduate transfer Josh Hayes, who took a lot of snaps at North Dakota State and Virginia, and you add a third guy with a lot of experience. I don't know of a better 3 deep at corner that I can think of that I feel really good about in the Big 12 than those 3. You're replacing a lot of snaps at safety. 4 seniors are gone, 2,300 snaps total. You bring in Sean Robinson, as you mentioned, former Missouri transfer, former TCU quarterback. He started 4 games last year before he got hurt. They made a lot of wholesale changes on the defense at Missouri. We'll see. You got snaps from TJ Smith and Strong. Like, I have concerns about Kansas State at safety. I do. But the corners, as you mentioned, if your corners are good, the safeties can be a little and I do like what they have at linebacker with Kansas State, which I'm letting kind of impact my opinion here. Like I like the linebacker situation. I think that can help in pass coverage. So I have Kansas State number 3. I think at corner that might be the best cornerback unit in the Big 12 with what they have. Okay, Joe, number 4.
Well, I just want to say that I think I figured out Adam's rankings is that if you have a corner or a safety that's 6'3" or taller, you're probably pretty high on the list.
Guilty. Guilty.
So I'm figuring that out.
Yeah.
I have Oklahoma State here. Phil, you and I kind of talked about earlier where, there's not a ton of starting talent returning. I mean, I agree with Adam that Jason Taylor is a phenomenal player. I think that when you needed a big play last year, he was kind of that guy that was doing it. Now, obviously, losing the 4 guys that we all know is going to hurt. But yeah, as we've talked about, you've already mentioned, there's so many guys coming back that showed plenty of potential. And a guy that Thomas Harper is one that's been around for a while. So I think that people just on the surface might see, they got one guy that's a returning starter and think that they're going to take a step back. But with all the talent they have returning, you mentioned Kendall Daniels and then bringing Derek Mason in to run the defense. I think that you're not going to see too much of a drop off, even if you have that returning starting talent.
I have OU at 4. I think, top to bottom, this is probably the most steady unit in the league, I would say. Um, I think so. Bill definitely jumps off the page. I mean, he's an explosive athlete. I watched him in high school. He went to Denton Ryan, crazy athlete. But I thought he was kind of underwhelming last year. I know he didn't play a whole lot. He's kind of playing like a nickel position. They're moving him around. And I think they've been bouncing him around a little bit. Um, I think at this point he's more of an athlete than like a football player, like an instinctual football player. So I think there's some growth there. The talent, certainly like the raw athleticism is certainly there, but um, like I know Woody Washington has a lot of snaps, DJ Graham, like a lot of these players are pretty good players. Key Lawrence was someone that I think people were really hopeful coming in from Tennessee last year. Again, I just kind of underwhelmed overall with the unit, but I think top to bottom, there's not really like most of these units we've already talked about have like really, really talented players and like huge holes or huge question marks. I don't really see that with Oklahoma. Like, I think it's pretty good unit from top to bottom, but I feel like unless Billy Bowman takes that next step, I don't see like a top, like a top or an all Big 12 caliber player in the secondary. Like let's say top two teams, maybe third team or honorable mention, something like that. But with that being said, collectively together, when you add up all, pretty good players, I think that's a really, really good unit, and certainly don't blame you guys for ranking them number one for sure. So
AKA what he really means is that none of them are 6'3" or taller, so that's why they're further down.
true. And Billy Bowman's like what, 5'9", so he's, or 5'10", like he's really short, so he's out. So sorry, Billy, if you're listening to this.
Okay, so number 4, I have Texas. I mean, you guys have covered pretty much everything. With Deshawn Jameson back at corner, Anthony Cook, the Ryan Watts transfer, I think is really good. Janae Barron, I don't remember you guys talking about him, who's supposed to man the star position. I remember him coming out of high school. I remember the recruitment of him. I have a weird thing about remembering DBs who I wanted to go to Oklahoma State and then went to Texas instead. Mostly because I enjoyed not developing. Maybe he will now because Herman's gone. I like him. I liked him out of high school. I'm really interested to see what kind of development he makes this year. And I think that's the biggest thing for Texas is the defense last year had major issues both with, coaching decisions, and these guys were just massively underdeveloped during Tom Herman's era. If this coaching staff is what we think that it's supposed to be based off of their history and acumen, like, they should all take a step and get better this year. And like the defensive line's the issue at Texas, not necessarily the backfield. I like this unit. The safeties are kind of, as you mentioned, Adam, like we'll see. But I like it as a unit. I really like Deshawn Jameson. Like, if you've got a guy I think is going to be just a pain in the ass at corner, like, I'm going to like your unit in the backfield. So I have Texas at 4, which is the lowest of everybody. So I guess I'm the Texas hater, which is fine. I will wear that badge. They're leaving. Down, baby. It's okay. Yeah. 15-yard penalty at the added on to the first kickoff of the season. Number 5, Joe, who you got?
I have Kansas State here. I don't really have anything much to add. I'm disappointed I don't get to talk about Deuce Vaughn for a whole podcast, but whatever, I'll let it slide. I don't have a ton to add. I really like the corners that we've talked about already. I just have concerns about the safety play. Obviously we mentioned, if you have good corners, average safety play will do, but I just don't know what we're going to get from that group. And I think that they have a lot to prove on that back end there, but that's kind of where Kansas State thrives, is when people are kind of doubting them. They're not really sure. And then I'm just going to say Deuce Vaughn's name one more time just for fun.
That's good.
We're on 5, right?
Yes, we are.
Okay, so I'm going to go kind of interesting that this is the first time they've been mentioned, but I'm going to go with Baylor. And certainly an interesting unit. I don't think that this was really the strength necessarily. I think the problem with Baylor is they've certainly been lacking in like I don't want to say quality cornerback play, but it's just like Like they've just been like kind of holding on. I feel like they've had such good play at the safety level and linebacker and up front that I think it's kind of made up for lack of better quality play at cornerback. A lot of questions. Obviously Jalen Petrie leaves like a massive vacancy or void. Oddly enough, I believe Larondo Johnson is the player that's going to take his place. And he's an interesting player because he's kind of a hybrid role, but a little bit different and than Petrie. I think he's probably a little bit less explosive, but a little bit more like smaller and squatty. I actually watched him in high school. He's from Lancaster. He's a good player, like high 3-end star player. He's going to be a good player. I don't know. He's going to be a different player than Petrie though, because Petrie was like a Eric Stryker / Troy Polamalu mix somehow. And he doesn't necessarily have that skill set, but he brings some other things to the table. So I think basically it's a pretty pedestrian unit with some really young players that have some upside that we don't really know much about. But at the end of the day, Baylor's probably going to be really, really good defensively because their front six or so is going to be so good that their back end doesn't need to be as good. So 5th ranked unit, but certainly a quality unit overall, just because of the other units. And who knows, they may break in some new starters and be pretty legit. But I don't see anything popping off the page. Like their high potential players, in my opinion, are we don't know about, are still in the front 6, other than Larondo Johnson. So I have I have Baylor at 5. So
Adam, how does it feel to be the biggest Texas and Baylor fan here on the show?
that feels awful. Like that's the worst I've felt in a long time. So thank you for bringing that up.
Well, since you're the first one to name a team, I will also be the first one to name a team. I actually have Texas Tech here at number 5. I like what they have with Adrian Taylor Demerson. And I think he can make a valid case for first team defensive back at the end of the year, depending upon how he plays this year. I like the addition of Keon Blankenbaker from Wyoming. Started 27 games for the Cowboys there. That was a good defense at Wyoming. Obviously, they're playing in the Mountain West, very different, but that was a good defense. It was a good passing defense. I think he will transition to Texas Tech well. At corner, there's 3 guys I think that are all solid, and Rashad Williams, Adrian Fry, and Malik Dunlap, who, if he can stay healthy, because he missed 6 games in Big 12 play last year due to injury, but they had a lot of expectation for him. You combine those 3, that's another solid 3 cornerbacks that you feel like you can rotate in and out. And my thing with cornerbacks is, if you got one really good one, and I think they do in Rashad Williams, then I feel good about you. If you've got a depth of 3, so you got 2 guys you trust and 1 guy you can fill in when you need him, then I feel really good about your cornerback spot. So they've got a really good safety. They've got 3 corners I like, and they've got an addition at safety out of the transfer portal that I think could be really good in the Big 12, kind of surprise some people. That's why I have Texas Tech at 5. I think this could be a sneaky good defensive backfield this year.
I like it. I'm feeling that vibe.
Thank you. Joe, who do you have at 6?
6, I have Baylor. Phil and I kind of talked about this before. You lose, and Adam also mentioned this, that losing Jalen Petrie obviously is going to hurt. That's like, you're almost like devaluing Petrie if you just say like, oh, they'll be fine without him. I think also you have Dave Aranda there, and he knows what he's doing, kind of similar to some of these other teams. And there's the cupboard's not bare with the talent that they have back. And so that for that reason, I feel fairly confident in what they're able to do. I just think that you're going to take a little bit of a step back when you lose such a versatile player in Jalen Petrie, and then obviously losing JT Woods is going to hurt as well.
You guys just wait till my Baylor spot comes. We'll be there in a little while.
I was about to say, do we need to be patient or?
We'll get there. We'll get there. You guys are much higher than I am. All right, Adam, who do you have at 6?
I have TCU, and I legitimately struggled with them from 2 on, because I guess they have the potential to be the best secondary in the league, but I'm not necessarily so. I believe it was CJ Caesar that basically came in for Noah Daniels for the most part. And like, I think he's fine. Like they're probably going to be okay at cornerback because you've got Tomlinson on, one side, and then this Noah Daniels healthy and Tomlinson on the field is the best duo probably in the league at corner. But Noah Daniels can stay healthy, and CJ Caesar is not Noah Daniels when he's healthy. So it's like you're kind of like, kind of going back and forth. I believe is it Marbury that came from Colorado? I don't know much about him because he's kind of somewhat of an unknown. Like he was at Colorado, but he doesn't have much production, and didn't play all that much. So I'm a little bit uncertain about him. Maybe I'm missing the mark there, but I feel more confident with the units, including Baylor, who probably has more questions than TCU, just from the fact that you're talking about more experienced players that can stay on the field, and probably more talented players. Like I don't necessarily know. TCU is very talented at corner. I'm a little bit concerned about safety for sure, but I know that we've talked about this many times that if you have good corners, you're probably gonna have good secondary. I don't know if everyone can be on the field for TCU, so I'm gonna roll with them at 6. So that's why.
I think your point of having trouble with them of 2 through 6, like I feel like 1 through 6, if you told me any of those teams finished with the best secondary this year, I'm not sure I'd be that surprised. Because all of them have a strength to them. All of them have some question marks. And like that's how I feel with my 1 through 6. Like 7, 8, 9, 10 are all down there at the bottom. But 1 through 6, if you told me at the end of the year that any of those was the best defensive backfield, I would probably I would say, okay, I'll ride with that. And at 6, I have Oklahoma State. Adam, for a lot of the same reasons you did. One of the things about OSU that's cracked me up. Pretty much since 2019, I feel like every year, and I hate to knock Ian, but he's the one who comes to mind, who did a great job with us here when we did pass catcher rankings. But every year it would be, everyone would be like, well, they lost. First, they lost AJ Green at corner. There's no way that anyone's going to be able to step up and play as well as a cover corner as he did. And then Rodarius Williams did. It's like, well, Rodarius Williams is gone. No one's going to be able to step up and play as well as he did. Well, and then Christian Holmes did, and Christian Holmes stepped. And every year they've had somebody step up into that, lock them down on an island corner. And every year they needed somebody, and someone has done it and done a really dang good job. All that is leading to, I don't care. I try not to be biased about Oklahoma State. But one of the most potentially biased things that I will say is that Tim Duffy and Hammerschmidt, the cornerback and safety coach at Oklahoma State, are 2 of the most underrated defensive back coaches in the country. They do an incredible job of evaluating the kinds of athletes that they want to recruit, getting talented guys in, safety and corner, and developing them, because OSU continues to put out solid cornerbacks. They're replacing both with Muhammad and Corey Black this year. One of them is going to step up and be awesome. I think more preseason polls and teams have leaned towards Jabbar Muhammad. I lean more towards Corey Black, but I think both are going to be solid. And at safety, like Thomas Harper's played. Jason Taylor's played a lot of football. He has made so many big plays, both safety and on special teams. Like, we'll see how he does being just the full-time starter, but like, it's not like there's not experience. There's not a ton of starting experience, but these guys have all played snaps. Kendall Daniels is a wild card if he's what we think he is. I think there's going to be growing pains for this unit. That's why I have them at 6 and not a little bit higher. But I think by the end of the year, throw in, it's not just that you have a new defensive coordinator, it's a defensive coordinator whose background is in coaching defensive backs. So that certainly doesn't hurt you. I think with coaching, with the way they've recruited at this position group in both safety and corner, and the proof in the pudding of the development here, like I think OSU is going to be fine. They won't be quite as good as last year in game 1, but I think this is a unit that's going to be good and it's going to get better throughout the year. Joe, number 7.
7, I have Texas Tech. I like a lot of the guys that you mentioned. I think Rashad Williams is really fun to watch. He was tested quite a bit last year. Dadrian Taylor-Demerson is another guy that was very productive for them. And I think, Adrian Fry's been there for a while. They lose a couple guys that obviously that hurts, but this is also a group that finished last in terms of EPA against the pass and, towards the bottom 10, I believe, in the country. And that's just really concerning. Especially with a lot of the offenses that you're going to face, a lot of the passing attacks that you're going to face. There's talent there, but again, it just comes down to, can this unit perform well together, cohesively? You know, I like some of the talent that they have individuals, but as a group, I'm just not sure if they can put it together. If they can, then I think that we're talking about a group that's going to be higher up on this list. But for now, I need to see it before I believe it.
So I'm going to go with Iowa State. And I feel like this is kind of more of a vote, like a blind vote, just saying they're probably going to figure it out because they're a great, generally have a great defensive culture and all that stuff. I think the move of Anthony Johnson is going to be interesting. So it's kind of like, it kind of reminds me of like Greg Eisworth, where, he basically shifted positions, I think, early on in his career, and undersized 5'11", 195, 200 pounds, moves from corner to this, and then they just get this crazy high functioning play. Iowa State does out of these like hybrid safeties. Somehow they keep finding them. So I don't think there's really anyone that stands out. I believe their projected cornerbacks are Miles Purchase and TJ Tampa, according to what I'm looking at from Phil Steele. And I do have some reservations in terms of just the overall talent level, but I feel pretty confident they're going to figure it out. I do think that this is kind of where the drop off is, though. Like we talked about the 6, and like that we talked about has like some really, really strong upside players. Not saying that doesn't exist here, but it's a little bit harder to see, more so than any of the teams that we previously talked about. So probably this is going to be a pretty good defense, especially when you got a guy like Will McDonald up front that's going to be wrecking havoc. But again, you're talking about sheer units individually. Certainly I knock them back a little bit more from the top 6. So.
All right, this might be perceived as a hot take. I wanted to put them higher, but this is as high as I could put them. I have Kansas.
Yes.
I really like Kenny Logan. And I think he's going to be fantastic for Kansas this year. Here's the thing. When we did our transfer portal winners and losers, we talked about Kansas as the biggest winner. You bring in Craig Young, who's a safety from Ohio State. He's got 3 years left. 132 snaps, 15 tackles. He's played well. Jarrett Paul started 12 of 13 games at corner. Comes in from Eastern Michigan. Marvin Grant, transferred from Purdue, started 13 games last year. I really like what they have added in the defensive backfield. Kansas didn't lose to the portal anything that they were like sad to lose. Everything they brought in, especially in the defensive backfield, has immediately improved that entire unit for Kansas. I have some questions about corner, but I really like what they did there. I really like Kenny Logan. I have Kansas here, and I'm sorry to the teams that have not been named by me yet. You'll get named here in a minute. And there's not a lot of separation between probably 7, 8, 9 for me. 10, sorry. But I really like Kansas here because I like what some of the other teams have at their position groups, but I really like Kenny Logan a lot, and he's so much of an X factor for me that I had to put them right here. All right, no one's telling me I'm an idiot, so this is good. I'm feeling.
I like it. I like the pick. I like the pick. I mean, at the end of the day, I think, and just a quick comment on the portal, like the portal's an opportunity to like eliminate historical barriers, like it's kind of it used to be like JUCO, like Kansas State built their program on JUCO, and like the transfer portal is the modern day JUCO, where it's like, Kansas can't go out and recruit traditional kids that are, basically the Baylors and Oklahoma States, and they're all doing hey, we're going to go just like recruit really good athletes and try to turn them into football players. So that's one strategy. And then you got kind of the lower tier that are like, all right, we're going to scoop up all the best talent we can in the portal. And to their credit, they did a hell of a job this offseason. So I like the pick. I think it's a good one. So.
Thank you. All right. Just pat myself on the back. Joe, who do you have at number 8, sir?
I have Kansas. I'm going to piggyback off of that. When your safety 8 leads the team in tackles, that's kind of a problem, honestly. I don't know.
That it is.
It's not
You
a,
know, and
a
it's
good
not like,
reflection
oh,
of
he
the
has
rest of
60
the
tackles.
defense.
Yeah, he had 110. I mean, I'm not saying Kenny Logan's bad, but that's really my only comment is that 110 tackles is too much for a safety.
He needed the help. That's why he brought so many safeties in. He needed some help because linebacker. Okay.
I will end the suspense. I also have Kansas at 8.
Nice.
And I thought that I was going to be going out on a limb, but here I feel like I'm like just the person that's piggybacking off everyone else. I think so. I agree that like Kenny Logan, I think, is a good player. Like I remember, and have in mind that this is based off of like watching him in depth for like 2 games, right? So take this for what it's worth. But he does have a lot of production because he's relatively on a bad defense from last year. But they have so much movement in the portal coming in. It's insane. So at the end of the day, like if you're looking at upside, I mean, West Virginia is kind of in the same boat. To a certain extent in terms of just activity. It's like a revolving door. But I think if you look top to bottom, I think the Kansas players, the Kansas portal additions, in addition to Kenny Logan, have more upside than the alternative. And I'm kind of excited to see what Kansas looks like on defense this year. I mean, I'm not saying they're going to be good, but I do have a lot of faith in DJ Elliott, who's their defensive coordinator. I think he's a good defensive coordinator. So we'll see what happens. But I like Kansas at 8, with not a lot of upside to move to 7. Not really prepared to go there. But a lot of stuff that would indicate that this could be a respectable secondary, something like that.
Yeah. Hey.
So
at this point, Kansas will take any unit on the field that's considered respectable. And if quarterback is as good as we hope it will be, then that might give them 2. And when's the last time you could say there's 2 respectable units on the field for Kansas football? I mean,
been a while. Been a while.
That might equal the 3 wins we think they'll
wait. I just remembered DJ Elliott went to Temple. So
let's see.
DJ Elliott was the former defensive coordinator. I'm an idiot. So disregard that. I don't know who their defensive coordinator is now. DJ Elliott was the defensive coordinator under Les Miles.
Brian Borland? I think that's right.
He must have come over. Did he come over from Buffalo with Leipold? Yeah.
Yeah. And he brought most of his. Think about both coordinators. I know I should know all these things, but folks, it's a lot.
It's hard to keep up with the. Give me a break. It's hard to keep up with the Kansas staff. Okay, when it turns over every 2 or 3 years, it's kind of a challenge.
Okay, at number 8, this is where I have Iowa State. Look, you guys lost Isheem Young, Datron Young, Craig McDonald. They lost a lot. As you mentioned, Anthony Johnson moving to safety. I like Bro Frailer at safety as well. So I think you've got 2 guys that I think will be a lot of fun at safety. Man, I know that Miles Purchase and TJ Tampa are the projected starters. Like last check, there was Tavon Kyle and a converted wide receiver also battling for the starting spots. Like they should have 2 pretty interesting safeties. We'll see if Malik Verdon, who I believe was called the MVP of spring practice, which sure. And not to mention, like, you lost 2 starting linebackers. And I really think Orion Vance is going to have a step-up year for Iowa State this year at linebacker. But you lose so much at linebacker. You lose so much in your secondary. I just have a lot of questions for Iowa State that I've got to see something for them before I can move them up higher on this list. All right, we're down to the bottom 2. If you're keeping track at home, you should know who we have here.
If anyone's still listening,
they get about halfway and they're like, bah. All right, Joe, number 9, who you got?
I have Iowa State. I've been a big fan of Anthony Johnson. I'm also intrigued to see what he can do at a new position. It's tough because I feel like Iowa State is just, I think everybody kind of just thinks they're this gimmick defense that just makes things different. Which there's some truth to that, but I think they also they're really good at what they do. But the secondary, I think, is gonna need some time to figure things out. Kind of just repeating everything you guys have basically said. It's just there's some potential there, but yeah, it's just not a group that I feel super confident in, especially coming into the season. And I don't know, maybe that's a good thing for Iowa State, because when they return their entire roster, they only get 7 wins. So I don't know. It's kind of like the Kansas State thing. It's like they're better off when people don't believe in them and then they just overachieve. Whereas when everybody expects them to make it to the Big 12 championship, they don't even get close. So I think that's a group that's going to need some time to figure things out, especially with who they lose. I couldn't see moving them any higher than 7th or 8th, maybe.
One thing that I forgot to mention, and I don't think I heard you guys mention this too, Asheem Young transferred to Ole Miss. That was such a huge loss for them. I think I remember when he was a freshman. I think it was 2 seasons ago. He came. I think he was he like freshman of the year? Is that even an award? And we were like, oh damn, like he's the next guy. And then he was pretty damn good last year. And then with Anthony Johnson and him and Young coming back, I think that bolsters a really strong secondary. But with him gone, it's just there's a lot of youth behind there, and I think that's going to be tough to overcome. So I think him probably one of the most impactful secondary transfers in the Big 12 was Asheem Young, in my opinion. So
yeah, I think I have them much higher if Young is coming back. I don't know if I'm putting them in the top tier, but yeah, Young returning definitely adds more, I guess, scheme versatility that they can utilize different guys. If they want Johnson to play safety, they could still do that with Young back, but now you're kind of forced to put Johnson back there because Young is gone. And, we mentioned Eisworth is gone too, but yeah, if Young comes back, this is a very different group.
No doubt.
I would have them ahead of Kansas if he was back. That's what I'll say. All right.
What an honor, man. Just rave reviews.
Adam, who do you have at 9?
I have Texas Tech. And I pretty much, I don't really have much to add from what Phillip you had earlier. Certainly a good group. It's kind of inverted of all the other units where most of their experience and talent is coming back on, kind of on the safety side versus the cornerbacks. I am interested. I don't think that they're overly talented in the secondary because ultimately they had a big talent gap that they had to overcome. But I am interested to see what Tim DeRuyter can do as defensive coordinator, who's made some pretty significant turnarounds in his career. Specifically, I think it was the one that was it Cal. I'm not sure if it was Oregon or Cal, but basically cut their points per game almost in half. I don't think that that's going to happen at Texas Tech specifically, but I think that that could play a pretty big impact. And I think that kind of has an impact on this discussion too, because we're gauging the units, but also the coaching, could influence, coaching can take an average unit and make them look really good, at the same token there. So nothing like crazy in terms of, I know Waters and they've got, I think Rashad Williams is a experienced corner, but I don't know if he's going to start. They've got a few guys they're looking at cornerback. From my perspective, nothing jumps off the page in terms of overly talented players. I was more excited about Kansas's players, to be honest with you, and that's not necessarily a slight to Texas Tech. It's probably more of boosting Kansas. But nonetheless, that's who I've got at 9, Texas Tech.
All right, I mentioned you'd hear him later on. This is where I have Baylor. Look, I didn't love their secondary last year, especially corner. Your safety was your strength. You bring back Christian Morgan, but everyone else is gone. They're talented at safety, but they are young. You bring back Al Walcott at corner. This wasn't a great unit last year. It was bolstered so much by the defensive line and the linebacking core. Your defensive line is going to be so good that maybe that the secondary doesn't have to do anything because they just hit the quarterback all the time. But you're going to have to prove to me that this unit is improved over last year, which I would think wasn't awesome. And you lost a lot of the strength from what helped you back there. Like, I'm not saying other people can't step up and be better, but it's a big ask. And so like I said, I need to see something from Iowa State. I've really got to see something from Baylor. And I need to see Baylor find a corner who scares me. Like, honestly, because I didn't see that last year from any of them. They gave up way too many big plays. They got turned around way too often. I need to see some big development for Baylor, especially without Petrie there. Like, he was such a cheat code for that defense, especially for the backfield. And he let them get away with some poor defensive back play. So this is why I have Baylor low. We'll see what they do. They'll probably prove me wrong, but I'm okay being wrong.
Baylor looked really good against
Kansas.
Oklahoma State.
No.
Sorry, I cut you off. Baylor below Kansas. I like it. Love it. What would you say, Joe? I cut you off.
Hey, Baylor's secondary was Spencer Sanders' favorite target in the Big 12 championship game. So
apparently they can catch.
Yeah.
That's good.
Well, hey, Baylor needs wide receivers this year, so maybe they can move.
Yeah. Playing both ways.
Okay, boys, we are going to have a consensus here. We are going to have one team that we all have in the same spot here at the bottom. Joe, why do you have West Virginia in last place?
Yeah, I was a little upset with West Virginia because and Kansas, because it's like, the last couple of years, it's like, I know who's going to be at the bottom, and then it's just working up from there. But now apparently I have to like Kansas, so now I have to actually work for the bottom spot. I just think that they lose so much, and last year wasn't exactly inspiring in terms of like a talented group that, kind of like you said before, nobody really puts fear into you when you're playing West Virginia. And they lost a lot of guys, whether that's graduation, NFL, or the transfer portal really hurt them at key positions. So that's going to be tough. But I just don't see anybody on there that I'm like, oh, that's a dude that's going to be a guy that's really going to, like, a guaranteed going to, put fear in an opposing offense. Now, Adam mentioned before, there's some potential with this group. So I think I like that, but not enough to put them higher than anybody else on this list.
Yeah, I mean, I think I don't have much to add. I would just say I do like the way that they're adding players to their roster. I mean, I think overall West Virginia has done a really nice job of like upgrading the talent threshold across the board. I think that they kind of have added a slew of like FCS caliber talent to secondary, which is fine. I mean, there's good players from FCS, and some of them could be good. I specifically think, I believe it's most of them might be backups, but Jazeer Cox and Marcus Floyd are coming from the FCS level, and there's no experience. I think it was it Charles Woods that started like a handful of games last year, and that's it. So they have like basically very little starting experience. And I know that like, I boosted up OSU because they don't have a lot of starting experience, but as far as I know, a lot of these players don't have a whole lot of snaps either. So it's not just starting experience. Despite all of that, I'm not sure the talent level is there. So like, even if there was like an upside to see there, like for example, with Iowa State, like I see some upside at cornerback, and they don't have necessarily a whole lot of experience under their belt. I'm not sure I see that West Virginia. So that was kind of the main thing that caused me of like inexperience and lack of upside is a bad combo, I think, in general. And for that reason, I ranked them 10, unfortunately. So
yeah, I mean, I'm with you guys. Like I know Charles Woods was a preseason Big 12 first team. We did not vote him there. He could be really good. He could be a starter this year for them. And look, West Virginia typically has a good defense, but the strength of their defense is typically the defensive line. I just have too many questions. The transfers, they could be nice. McCormick could be nice. Rashad Ajayi from Colorado State, I'm probably mispronouncing it, I don't care. Could be nice, but they lost so much to the transfer portal across the board on defense and in the secondary. Like, the defensive line should be good. The linebackers got more depth. From the West Virginia people I've talked to, like, the secondary is a problem and scary. There's a reason they're 10th. And I'm not trying to like sit here and be like but they're not. I have too many questions. Like show me, prove to me. Like any West Virginia fan who's like, no, they're going to be way better than you think. Like you have to sell me on something other than just like, well, I think so and so, and they said this about spring ball. I'm like, okay, like I'm with you guys. I don't know what else to say. Like I have the least amount of faith in West Virginia of everybody on this list.
It will be interesting to see how it works out though, because like basically they're almost 75% of their starting secondary could be transfers from FCS. Because if correct me if I'm wrong, but I think Charles Woods came from like Indiana State or Illinois State or something like that, and they have a few other transfers from the FCS level too, which I think it'll be interesting to see how it works out, because like it might be like an avenue of talent that hasn't been like completely exhausted by the bigger programs. And I think Charles Woods definitely will be interesting to see. I didn't even know he was voted first team Big 12. That's news to me. That sounds like an unbelievable reach. I would not even have him like honorable mention probably. So that's wild to me, but I am fascinated to see how that works out. And I think Neil Brown's a good coach for the most part. And I applaud him for trying a unique strategy nonetheless. So
hold on, I'm now going to confirm this because I'm pretty sure yep, Charles Woods, first team preseason 2022. Yeah, I don't know how he made that jump. He was he wasn't even honorable mention last year from what I could tell. But I'm looking at 2022 preseason all
So is
Big
it
12
Tomlinson and him for first team?
It's it's just DB. So it's not corner or safety, it's just DB. So it's Kenny Logan, Julius Brents, Jason Taylor, Hodges Tomlinson, and Charles Woods.
Wow. There's like maybe 5, 6, 7 corners that I would absolutely take in front of him.
It doesn't have to be corner. There are other defensive backs in the Big 12 that I would put over him. We put in Dadrian Taylor Demerson. That's who I had. Like I think he's going to be really good at safety. I threw him. I'm glad he got on the list. Like I don't think he'll be there at the end of the year. I don't know.
Wow.
Yeah, I'm not sure what to say about that. Other than I disagree.
That's the best way to put it.
Yeah.
That was interesting.
That's a no for me. It's a no for me.
Yeah.
All right, guys. Now that we've wrapped this up, any general thoughts or anything when you were putting your list together that maybe stuck out to you the most or surprised you the most?
I almost added the 4 new Big 12 teams in here just for fun because this list is just going to get longer and longer.
Okay. Well, now that you've teased that, now you have to rank them in the
just the 4 new ones.
Yeah.
So I'll probably go UCF is probably the best one coming in. And then it's tough between BYU's last. I think they have plenty of talent returning and starting talent returning, but nobody that's like, that top tier guy. I'll probably go Cincinnati just because they have the track record, and then Houston I think is going to be a lot better. But I think all 4 new teams would probably be above maybe my 7 through 10 if I'm putting them all in there. I think they're super talented this year.
I mean, honestly, all 4, at least from last year's perspective, produced pretty good defenses for the most part. So.
Mm-hmm.
It's a new age in Big 12 football when 5 years ago that would be a little bit of a different discussion probably. So
be the Big 16 before we know it.
Right. This is going to sound really stupid and everyone's going to make fun of me for it, which is fine. It's nothing new. I think the takeaway that I had was that I don't know if I've seen like this caliber of talent that Texas has. Like their wide receiver talent is like pretty crazy good. And the fact that they've got a few, legit cornerbacks is like generally pretty good. They've still got a lot of holes. I still don't necessarily think that they're not, there's not a like number one, like a clear number one team in the Big 12. So I still wouldn't like anoint them to that. But it will be interesting. A lot will hinge on the quarterback for Texas. And I'm not a big Quinn Ewers fan. I've been watching him for a long time. He went to high school down the road from me and all that. My wife went to South Lake Carroll, so we've been following him for a long time. And I'm not like all in on him, but he is probably going to be a pretty good quarterback in the league, mixed with some of the stuff that they've got going on at the skill position. And then the things that they have coming down the pipeline at the offensive line are certainly exciting. So, Texas isn't back, but they could be back later.
You said Texas is back in this episode. Don't you backtrack now?
You said it a lot, Adam.
You were horns up while we were horns down, so I don't know what's going on over there.
Adam Lunt, Secret Orange Blood, subscribe.
Hey, as long as they can be back in 2024 or whatever, I don't care. That's fine. Go be back or whatever 2025. Just wait a few years. Give us
right.
And then go be back all you want. That's fine. So, but that was something that stood out to me. I'm trying to think too of like I get the feeling that like the weird thing for me would be that like there may be like 5 teams. Like most people think that there may be like 2 or 3 teams. I feel like that group is solid 5 at the top of the list in terms of like who has a chance to be in Arlington. And I don't necessarily think that I would differentiate any of them. Like Kansas State, Texas, OSU, OU, and Baylor to me are like a hair like late, really, really similar in terms of strengths, weaknesses, all that stuff. And any 2 of them could go to the Big 12 title game. I think Kansas State's a really, really good football team, top to bottom. And I think a lot of times people will leave them out of that discussion just because they're Kansas State. I think they're brilliant. I would almost put them in front of Texas, and I just talked up Texas like crazy. So I'm a big Kansas State believer. That was the second observation. So
Adam is taking Texas fans on an emotional roller coaster in one episode.
Talked him up and then threw him back down. So
you heard it here. Adam's predicting Texas versus Kansas State in the Big 12 title game.
That would be fun.
I'd watch it. I would watch that. That would be a interest. I'm sorry if you tell me we got a Big 12 title with just Bijan versus Deuce. Yeah, I'd watch the crap out of that. That would be awesome. That is going to be the most interesting battle in the Big 12 this year. Is those 2 for RB1. You guys have been awesome so much. Adam, do you have anything you want to plug?
No.
Okay.
I have nothing to plug. Don't talk to me. Texas is not back. Don't hate tweet me. And hopefully July ends sooner than later. That's what I'll plug. And stop being so hot.
Joe, I know you do. You have a fantastic college football preview magazine. It is one of the ones that I use along with a few different others, but I have the digital copy. It's fantastic. Joe, where can everybody check that out, as well as the rest of the wonderful work you do covering college football?
You can just find me at Joe Broback. All hateful comments can go to Adam. I don't really deal with that. Adam's my hate department. So, you can just find it there.
All right, guys, you've been awesome. Thank you so much. This was a great time. I think this audio has actually recorded and should be good to go. So hopefully everyone is listening to this and not me angrily trying to re-edit just myself like last week. Thank you to everybody. We'll be back next week. What will be on that episode? I don't know, because if I try and tell you, it won't happen.